Welcome to the Endless Highway on the HAN Network. My name is Rich Patchkofsky. I'll be your host. And for this segment, we'll be interviewing Richard Neal, Connecticut-based singer-songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, teacher, and producer at Prime Numbers Productions. Welcome to the show, Rich.
Hey, Rich, thanks for having me, man.
Nice to see you. Richard has a new CD out, which we're going to talk about shortly. But before we do, we're going to get into some of his background and musical history. And Rich, you've been around for a long time. Why don't you tell the audience how many years you've been in the music business?
Oh, since somewhere in the last century, Rich.
The last century.
It's true. I started paying engagements somewhere around 1968 or so.
All right. Well, before that, though, your introduction to playing music happened in 1964. Isn't that true?
Very true.
Okay.
Like so many other people of our generation, the Beatles and Ed Sullivan just kind of changed everything forever. And somehow, looking back on it, I knew what the future was going to be, even though you couldn't articulate it in those days.
That's right. You became the best tennis racket air guitar player on the block, right?
Virtuoso tennis racket guitar player, I'll tell you.
And that was, you were 9 years old?
Yeah, I was 9 years old in 1964. So it was a very powerful experience. Everybody in our generation was pretty much swept up in that.
That's true.
If you think about so many of the musicians you know, all started the same way. They all were watching the same TV show that night, and that created a whole generation of artists. It was a pretty interesting time.
When did you get your first guitar?
It wasn't too long after that, because I just pestered my parents to the point, I'm sure, where I drove them nuts until they came through with it. But it wasn't too long after that.
We had a conversation at your house a couple of days ago where your first paying gigs were with a dinner dance band. How old were you?
I was 15. My dad used to drive me to the shows or the performances, and we would play at country clubs and catering halls and all kinds of things, and all dance music of today. It was quite a learning experience.
When you say dance music of the day, though, what do you mean? What types of things?
Well, everything. We used to have a stack of music books about 6 feet tall, and any request that anybody had for any song that had ever been published from the 20s up to that time was something that we could play. And so every couple of weeks there'd be another music book that would show up with all the hits and everything in it. So our repertoire was endless.
Well, did you take lessons?
For a short period of time, but I got bored with it and just started teaching myself. Ultimately, it was pretty much self-taught at that point.
And you said that at this point, that's where you learned to do chart reading and stuff like that. This was in high school, correct?
Yeah, because you had to be ready to play any song in any style at any time. I learned on the bandstand pretty much, on-the-job training, just how to feel the different types of grooves, all the Latin feels and the rumbas and the polkas and anything, all the rock music of the day, the swing music, all the ballads, anything.
But this wasn't a rock band per se, though.
No, not at all.
But did you play in a rock band in high school?
No, never did. I didn't play into a rock band until I was probably 40 years old. I always loved it. That was my principal thing, but I don't know what happened. I got sidetracked by American roots music, the kind of thing that you like to do.
Well, that's true. Well, you talked about that when you went to college, your introduction to the blues and Liberty Banjo and that. You want to talk about some of that stuff? Yeah,
well, it was sort of a lightning bolt. It was one of those experiences where just somebody in the dorm was playing something that was involving dobros or banjos or something, and it was...
Well, you talked about the first Hatuna album, too.
Yeah, geez, I couldn't believe you could do that on a guitar. That changed everything pretty much, Yorma, sure. And of course, from there, that led back to all the great Trad players, Gary Davis, Blind Blake, Mississippi John Hurt. That was the only thing I wanted to do in those days. And that was the highest form of the art as far as I was concerned.
And that's when you picked up the banjo then, or?
Yeah, right about the same time, because that led into all the different types of roots music that's all sort of related in my mind anyway. The bluegrass guys, certainly Earl Scruggs on the banjo, Bill Monroe, the Osborne brothers. That's the only thing that I wanted to do. Dan Hicks was another big, he kind of fused all that stuff into an interesting musical concoction. He was a big influence.
Well, tell us the story about how, like, you were in Alan Block's sandal shop, and that's where you found the banjo book, right? The Earl Scruggs banjo.
I had heard that Earl Scruggs, in fact, had published a book about how he did it, and of course you couldn't find anything in those days. And I had somebody saw an act I was playing in and said, you guys would be great in the Village, and took us down there to show us around. And we ended up in the second location of the sandal shop on 6th Avenue across from Sheridan Square. And there it was, the holy grail of the banjo. If I finally found it, just stumbled upon it. And so that's where I met Clive Davis, too, who was there. And of course, one of my great career moves was he offered to sign me on the spot, and I totally ignored him because I heard the Earl Scruggs book.
Because you had found the book, that's right.
Brilliant career move number one.
And you still have the book.
Yeah, I still have that book. Yeah.
Now, is that the way, did you learn banjo through that book or some other way?
Well, yeah, through the book, and also slowing the LPs down to 16. But of course, the banjo sounded like, you know, so you couldn't really tell what was happening. But yeah, in those days, you didn't have a choice. I mean, today, boy, with all the resources available to people.
Yeah, there's a lot of resources.
And the state of the art of musicianship today is just, as a result, is just unbelievable. All the young folks coming around today are just playing circles around everybody.
Was that your introduction to bluegrass?
Well, sure. Probably, you know, probably came through the Grateful Dead and Old in the Way, if I recall.
That's like a lot of people.
Oh, sure, especially northern.
Yeah.
Northern musicians tended to come through it, maybe Cumberland Blues or something. Certainly Old in the Way was quick to follow. And then through all of that, that led back into the original musicians, the people who invented the art form, and that's where things got very interesting, because there's a whole underground world that existed that you had never stumbled upon. You know, it's a great.
So did you go to festivals and stuff like that, or?
Yeah, there weren't that many in those days in the early '70s, but whenever there was one that you could get to, absolutely. So to see J.D. Crowe and the New South with the original group of Tony Rice and Ricky Skaggs, Jerry Douglas was in that group. And see
they
them
were all
close.
Young too. They were.
Yeah,
really young.
The original New South album band I saw at a festival in Rhode Island, and that just was mind-boggling. John Hartford at that festival, just enormously influential musicians.
And was that around the time you formed a band or were in a band called Plexiglass? Or was that later?
Well, that was probably 10 years later. That was in the 80s, I think.
That was before the Grotto?
Actually, that was right about the same time. There was an overlap there where the punk rock band and the bluegrass band were sort of existing more or less. In fact, the bluegrass band Plexiglass actually played at the Grotto. We opened up for Dan Hicks, in fact.
So tell us about Plexiglass. Who was in it? You know, the types of things you did, because that lasted for a while.
Yeah, we were there for years. Judd Fuller, who's a well-established musician in Nashville right now, played the bass and sang. Chris Teskey, who was a
WPKN DJ,
stalwart bluegrass guy and fine singer and guitar player. Glenn Burley played the mandolin, and we had a couple fiddle guys who would come through there. Stacy Phillips played with us. Mike Platt, who I understand just passed away recently, played fiddle with the group. Really fine musicians.
And Stacy Phillips is actually a Grammy-winning dobro player.
Go figure.
Yeah, go figure.
He told me that he had to buy his statue.
Oh, you had to buy his statue.
When you're a dobro player, you have to buy your statue. They don't provide it for you, so.
So it must have been sort of odd, though, because you're playing, here you are in a sort of a bluegrass band, and you told me that you played in the Grotto in a rock band also.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I played electric guitar with a fellow called Bad Bob.
Yeah, I have Bad Bob's name written down
He
here.
was quite the guitar slinger and writer, and that was a great scene. That was probably my favorite music scene ever because it was 7 nights a week of all original music.
It was all original
I mean,
music?
pretty much. Miracle Legion was, who's out playing around again, were a big attraction down there at that club. So it's good to see they're back out and around again. That was a
Yeah, I saw
wonderful
something about that on the internet.
Yeah,
today.
they're out.
And just one more thing before we go to break. This is where you met James Velvet.
Yes.
We can talk about James when we come back.
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna take a break for a commercial, and we'll be right back on the Endless Highway at the HAN Network.
Are you hoping winter is finally in our rearview mirror? Can't wait for the air and water temperatures to start rising? Well, if the answer is yes, you need to get over to Darien or Westport and stop by the Dock Shop, where it's always summer. Both shops are being stocked with lots of new merchandise, including fishing tackle, marine electronics, boating supplies, and more. But remember, the Dock Shop isn't your average tackle shop. At the Dock Shop, you'll also find the finest selection of nautical apparel, jewelry, home decor, and gifts in New England. Boater, beach bum, fisherman, or simply love the New England coast, this is a unique place to shop. The Dock Shop, 51 Tokenique Road, Darien, and 609 Riverside Avenue, Westport. Online at dockshop.com.
Alberto Londano Professional Painting, Wallpapering, and Carpentry has been serving Fairfield County for over 20 years. Based in Norwalk, Alberto takes pride in his work by offering you only the best quality service and products. Call Alberto today to get a free estimate and be one step closer to a new and exciting home makeover. 203-866-9635.
A Better View Window Cleaning Plus has been cleaning glass all over Connecticut for over 20 years. They also specialize in cleaning chandeliers, mirrors, skylights, tiles, and will power wash anything that needs cleaning. They hold an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and are fully insured and bonded. When you deal with a Better View, you're dealing with the best, not the rest. Call today for a free estimate, 203-284-8836, or visit them online, abetterviewcleaning.com. I'm Kate Chaplinsky. Join us for Coffee Break, weekdays at 11 to get the latest Connecticut news, weather, high school sports, and more. News doesn't get any more local than on Coffee Break on the HAN Network.
Okay, we're back with Richard Neal at the Endless Highway on the HAN Network. Before we went to break, Rich, we were talking about your relationship with James Velvet. Did you meet James at the Grotto?
Most likely, our paths had crossed over the years. I actually met him at a plexiglass show, and we ran into each other at the Grotto. Then, after a while, we started playing together. I replaced Jim Chapdelaine in the Mockingbirds, who had a residency at Cafe 9. We played it on the final Saturday of every month for at least 11 years, probably 12. They did it for a year before I showed up on the scene, and we became collaborators and friends. After the Mockingbirds finished, we played up to the day that he passed away. That's just about a year ago now.
Yeah, about a year ago.
Yeah, so
and he wrote all original music himself, right?
He was a hugely influential figure in the New Haven music scene, and mentored all kinds of writers, and did a lot for the scene. He used to host, obviously he was with Rick Allison on the local band show.
That's right, I remember that.
On WPLR forever and ever. They're still going strong. Frank Critelli replaced James, but Rick and Frank are still doing that. So James was a big champion of local and regional music, particularly original writers, and hugely influential.
A nice guy,
character.
too.
Well, wonderful guy,
Yeah,
talented
nice guy.
guy, very intelligent guy. I was honored to have him as my friend. He was one of the major dudes that you're ever going to know.
Nice.
Miss him terribly to this day. It's huge,
I only got to see him play once.
huge loss.
Yeah. So around this time, now we're around the 1990s. Now you worked at Trodnossel. You were a recording engineer at Trodnossel and some other place too, right? Let me see my notes here.
Yeah, I used to work at that little 8-track studio in Bridgeport, which was called Downstairs Recording, and that was sort of how I ended up meeting all those guys from the Grotto, because they all recorded there. That was a big stop. Bad Bob, in fact, recorded his work there, and I knew the guy who owned it was running it, and so he turned over the keys to me there, and we had that going on towards the end of its existence, and then I ended up at Trodnossel for a few years after that in the 90s, and realized I didn't like engineering.
That's what you said. Yeah, you said you didn't like engineering, but that's sort of where your life as a producer began, correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So we were talking about this the other day too. Explain. What does a producer actually? What's their job?
To produce, you got to finish the project. You have to see that your work gets completed and whatever it is you're trying to do gets finished, and hopefully it doesn't cost more money than you planned on and doesn't drive everybody nuts in the process. But the main thing is to just keep things moving. You have to try to, because you can get bogged down in choices, and I think one of the principal, if not the ultimate objective, is you got to keep things moving.
Do you have an overall effect on the final sound of whatever
Oh
project
yeah,
it is?
oh absolutely.
Well, in what way though?
Well, from the way you record, there's lots of ways to record. You can layer the parts one at a time, or you can sit in a room and play live. Every act has a little different approach to that. Some people would prefer to do one of the other ways. So you have to be able to organize the sessions accordingly, to the choice of microphones, to how the audio is processed. In my case, because I work mostly with songwriters, I tend to get involved in the songwriting process at the beginning. And it's usually the songs end up in very different forms by the time we get finished tweaking them, fussing with them, reshaping them. So my bias tends to be towards getting the songs in shape so that it makes it easier and facilitates the recording process a little bit better. Because you certainly don't want to take all this time and record a bunch of stuff and realize that the form of the song is inadequate or could be better, because then you have to go back and do that all over again. So I like to do pre-production and hear the material, make sure everything is in shape, and go through the collaborative process with the writers and the artists to put it together so that by the time we start working, it goes a little bit more.
Well, we can give you a little plug here too. Prime Numbers Productions is your personal studio, at-home studio, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I call this studio Circle Sound, but my corporate entity is
Prime Numbers.
Prime Numbers. Yeah.
And do you want to talk about some of the people you worked with, or recently?
Oh, yeah, geez. Recently, let's see. I'm recording Matt Miklas and the Nameless Trio right now. Those guys are wonderful.
Yeah, they're real good. Those
Great
guys are real
band.
good.
Very clever, very creative group. I've worked quite a bit with Chris Berardo and the Desperados. And his brother, Mark Douglas Berardo, who's a gifted singer-songwriter guy himself. He travels all over the country, so I've recorded those guys extensively over the years. James Velvet's number of James' projects over the years I've recorded and produced. So many, I mean, it's sort of hard to even remember them. I'm sorry if I've left everybody out. I'm sorry, guys. I just can't remember them all anymore.
You know, you're involved in a lot of other things too, like I have written down here, Bluegrass and Beer, the Flagpole Radio. You want to talk about Flagpole Radio?
Yeah, that's a really interesting program.
And that's at the Edgerton Town Hall in Newtown, correct?
Yeah, well, we have a show coming up on April 30th, in fact, at the
it's Edmonton.
Edmonton Town Hall in Newtown on the, April 30th, that's Saturday night. And that's a really fun, it's sort of based on the old-time radio shows where there are actors reading skits, and then our house band will play a couple tunes, and they'll do a couple of skits, and then we have a special musical guest artist every show. This month will be Aztec Two-Step, which is Rex Fowler is a member of. He's the guy who produced my record. We'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that in a minute, yeah.
But that's a lot of fun. Very, very funny, and it's a really good band.
Well, it's a great band. You should talk about the band. Jim Allen, Rich Brodsky.
Yeah, Rick Brodsky, Howie Bouget, Francine Wheeler singing. Just a band that is unlimited in the scope. We're just as likely to play a rock tune with electric instruments as we are to break out the banjo and play bluegrass breakdown and ballads and swing music and anything in between. So it's really wonderful to be able to play with a band that's that versatile and adept at those different styles.
And you've backed up some fairly major names. Jonathan Edwards, right?
Jonathan Edwards.
Tom
Chapin a couple times.
Livingston
Taylor.
Taylor,
Peter Yarrow. We've played with Peter a dozen times over the years, here and there. We did a few shows with Peter Yarrow at the Ives Center outdoors in the big amphitheater there. That was a couple of times there. So lots. Again, there's so many of them. It's hard to.
It's a lot.
We've been doing it for a while, so it's hard to remember all of them. It's all on the website, folks. You can go see it.
Well, outside of that too, talk about the Podunk band competition. What was the year you won that? You were involved in that?
I think it was 2010. Our band won that one.
You won that one.
Yeah, that was really cool. Particularly because the band was an unusual one. We had no mandolin, and there was a cello in place of the mandolin, and the singer didn't play an instrument and just sang. So the configuration of the band was unorthodox. I suppose that worked for us, and we were performing a set of entirely, which comprised original music. So that was a little unusual. So I think we were.
Did you do any traditional bluegrass in that band?
Well, in the longer shows, we would do a couple of, Walls of Time by Bill Monroe. But that set, we principally did concert-length sets of 45 minutes or an hour, and the repertoire was 95% original music. So we were a little unusual, and I like to think that worked in our favor that year, because I think we really stood out from the typical thing, and luckily the judges were open to that kind of thing. They aren't always, the tradition is a very deep one in that style of music, and people who love their trad, bluegrass love their trad.
That's
bluegrass,
right.
And it's a little,
That's
it's
right.
like the blues thing,
That's
right?
right.
You can really run afoul of the authorities, as it were, if you're not careful.
That's
so,
well, the good thing, though, one of the things I know you wanted to talk about was the good thing about winning that competition. It opened you up to the festival circuit, and some interest from fairly major labels, correct?
Oh yeah. Well, whenever you do something like that, it's suddenly people know who you are who might not otherwise know who you are. It happened pretty quickly at that point. You know, word, it's a small community, the music industry, and word tends to travel fast. So when you receive an accolade like that, you're pretty rapidly exposed to a much wider audience of promoters, bookers, the record business. So it happened pretty quickly for us as a result of that, and we were able to remain booked for a couple of years in advance, actually. So it was nice to know that you had some sense of what was coming up. So that was fun. It was a good experience.
Okay, we're gonna take a short break, and we'll be back. And Richard's gonna play live for us here on the Endless Highway at the HAN Network.
For over 25 years, Mike Cizik Painting and Wallpapering has been the name to know for residential and commercial properties in Fairfield County. He uses only the top brands, including Benjamin Moore, for impeccable preparation and lasting quality. Call Mike now and receive $500 off any job over $7,000. Mike is currently accepting reservations for spring, so call him today at 203-770-8869 or 203-972-3310. For your custom painting, finishing, and staining needs, it's Mike Cizik. At the Sylvan Learning Center of Darien, experienced teachers and personalized academic support equals superior results. Our certified teachers uncover skill gaps, address specific needs, and help students realize greater academic success and increased confidence. We're enrolling now. Individualized after-school tutoring in reading, math, history, elementary math, algebra, geometry, calculus, high school science, and study skills. For a free consultation, call 203-655-3276 or email gmcsylvan@gmail.com.
Had a sports injury or slip and fall that needs immediate care? Coastal Ortho Express Urgent Care gives you direct access to an orthopedic specialist fast without an appointment. Biking, golf, tennis, soccer, whatever the sports injury is, sprain or fracture, Coastal Ortho Express can help. Coastal Ortho Express Urgent Care open Monday through Saturday in the iPark building at 761 Main Avenue in Norwalk, or go to coastalorthoexpress.com. That's coastalorthoexpress.com. Like them on Facebook.
I'm Kate Chaplinsky. Join us for Coffee Break, weekdays at 11 to get the latest Connecticut news, weather, high school sports, and more. News doesn't get any more local than on Coffee Break on the HAN Network.
I'm Denise DiGregoli, the host of The Drive on the HAN Network. Join me Tuesdays for some motivational, intelligent talk with a little humor as we visit with people who live their lives mindfully. Tune in to The Drive live on Tuesdays, 12:30, here on the HAN Network.
Okay, we're back at the Endless Highway on the HAN Network, and Richard Neal is going to perform a song from his new CD, Step Up. Take it away, Rich.
Things were so much different then, back in the day, when the Grand Ole Opry was a block from Broadway. For $1 you could buy a beer and a pack of cigarettes, and a man could find a woman like Tammy Wynette. She will have a mile-high beehive, eyelashes out to there. She'll stay at home and cook your supper and raise the children that she will bear. Oh, look the whole world over from Shelton to Tibet. There must be one woman left like Tammy Wynette. She will be my first and only love, not just the next of 5 or 6. I will buy her costume jewelry, she my guitar picks. It will be a match made in heaven, a blessed duet. When I find that woman like Tammy Wynette, and when I come home drunk and ornery, she will understand, because a girl like Tammy stands by her man. My mother will I'll approve of her, no ifs, ands, or buts. She say, you finally brought me home a lady, not one of your usual sluts. Mother will just have to wait because I haven't found her yet. Still looking for that woman like Tammy Wynette. I'm still looking for that woman like Tammy Wynette. Oh, that's just silly.
Thanks, Rich. So anyway, that's from your new album. And do you want to talk about the new album? Who produced it? Rex Fowler. You can talk about Rex Fowler and some of the people that played on it before we.
Well, Rex is one of the heroes. You know, back in the day, Aztec Two-Step, we used to go see them play all over the place. They were big heroes of the acoustic music scene, writers, and Rex is one of the brilliant singers in the rock era, in my opinion. One of the great joys of studio work is hearing his voice coming through the beautiful studio sound system with your headphones and the expensive mics. That's really something else to hear that. And he sang beautifully on the these recordings, this special stuff. And
well, he sings your praises here in this. It's sort of a review where he says. You'll hear subtle influences in Richard's singing and songwriting, including dashes of Randy Newman, David Bromberg, various members of the band. You'll also hear some breezy love songs in the likes of You and Love Struck, as well as poignant moments with Skin and Bone, Blue Town, Before the Last Acorn Drops, and the finale, The Jubilation Train, is a glorious gospel number that features the superb backing vocals of Porter Carroll Jr., of the Hall & Oates Band, and Margaret Samalot. How do you say her last name? Fielen. Yeah, Fielen. I believe Richard Neal is a fresh new talent in the contemporary acoustic, Americana, and folk music genres, and I hope you'll give him an honest listen.
You just did.
That's pretty nice. Yeah, that's Rex Fowler from Aztec Two-Step. Do you want to talk about any of the musicians on the record? Or?
Oh, yeah. Well, my buddy Jordan Jantz, playing the bass and the cello, he's my stalwart, just a great musician and one of my best friends in the whole world. Bobby Shuggy, who's been here forever from Ho and all the bluegrass bands. Bobby's a wonderful musician and a writer in his own right. Talia Cott played the fiddle. I was privileged to work with she and her mom, Lisa Furman, on their CD, and so Talia contributed. But I played all the instruments outside of the bass and the fiddle on the recording, so there's not much else to talk about. And it's,
okay, nice.
Mandolin and dobro and banjo and guitar playing in there, so it's mostly my stuff going on there. One-man show, one-man operation.
Okay, and before we go out and you play your last number, is there anything you'd like to tell younger people about getting into this business or just being a musician in general?
Don't.
Just don't.
Just joking.
Just don't
no.
do it.
Do. Follow your heart and be prepared to work. And remember that there's a whole chain of people who are going to be associated with you whose livelihoods and reputations depend on you. You don't show up, everybody gets a bad rap from that. The promoters, the other musicians, the people at the venue, the agents, the management people. It's a lot of work, and if you love it, it doesn't matter what happens because you love it, right? Like you said, right. It's a calling, and for me, I mean, that's what we talked about all those years ago when I was 9 years old. I didn't know it at the time, but
it picked you.
It picked me, and despite all of the sacrifices that you tend to make, it's been worth every minute of it. And if you want to go there with wholeheartedly and just do what you do, and everything will take care of itself.
Yeah. Okay, so talk about, as we go out, you talk about the song you're going to play as we go out, actually.
Well, I love the Valley. I think it's one of the most beautiful places in the world that I've ever seen. The rivers and all those beautiful old buildings. Talk about Americana. Those are just beautiful examples of America to me. And I just love driving up and down the river roads in Stratford and Shelton, all up through Newtown, and just immersed in the beauty of that area. And I just started thinking about this a little bit and put together a little fictional account of somebody who might live in that town or some town in the valley, and tells a little story about what may or may not have happened.
And the song is called
The Red Brick Housatonic River Town. In this red brick Housatonic River town, life goes on as before. Some folks stay and they raise their kids, and some move out when they get divorced. And the river keeps on flowing on its way to the sea. That's the way that it's always been, and that's how it's always gonna be in this red brick Housatonic River town. There are no more factories on Factory Street. The manufacturers are gone. The empty buildings loom and leer, and the vacant lots gape and yawn. And I think back to what they always told us growing up here as a kid. There would always be a good job for you, and we'd have it better than our parents did in this red brick Housatonic River town. The river is a survivor, from its bed to its surface foam. And even though this town is down and out, I still call this place my home. The morning sun glints upon the water and sparkles like diamonds or quartz. And there's not much left to do around here at night except follow the local high school sports. And maybe one of those kids is gonna make it and get a chance to go pro. And we can boast that we watched him then. That is someone that we used to know from this red brick Housatonic River town. This red brick Housatonic River town.
Nice, very nice. Rich, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Rich.
Thank you very much. And thanks for tuning in to The Endless Highway on the HAN Network.